Hey guys, welcome back to our next topic in our discussion on um, installation art. We're going to go ahead and talk about this guy here, Christo, and his partner. Oh crap! And his partner Jean Claude. No, that's not what I meant to do. Stop. Move. Get out of the way, Fauna. And these are installation artists that got their start in Russia, doing propaganda art for the USSR. And then eventually they kind of got, well, obviously got disenfranchised with the work that they were doing and started doing work about propaganda art and about covering up truth, covering up reality. And they got their start literally by wrapping entire buildings in cloth, like we see here, except they used white cloth and rope. So let's go ahead and stop for a little bit and let's go ahead and write down. Um, let's go ahead and write down this tag, which is the gates that was installed for a short time in New York City's Central Park. Now, Christo and Jean Claude, they make their art not by selling the actual pieces, because these are small, independently made installations that are not finite. Or they are finite, they're not infinite. They are up for a very short period of time. And they make the money to create these works by actually selling designs, plans, drawings, photographs, and diagrams of their ideas, which I'll give you a look at in just a little bit. So if you haven't already done so, pause the video, write down the title. We're talking about environmental installation art. So let's jump into The Gates by Christo and Jean Claude. So this is the type of image that they would have been selling to collectors and investors, diagramming what their intentions were to create these temporary works of earth art. Unlike the Spiral Jetty by Robert Smithson, which was permanent but ever changing, these were fixed and finite. But they did have a sense of transformation within them. Now, as you can see here, the gates themselves were created along the pathways of Central Park. Now, if you're not familiar with Central Park, we need to talk about it a little bit. So, what's wrong with? This is how they got their start. Christo Javachev and Jean-Claude de Gilbion. And they started by wrapping these works. They were political and interventionists. They often were commenting on capitalism and consumer culture. And they created these statements by wrapping or packaging buildings, as we see here above with Berlin. Oh, or the Australian coastline, which we see below. So here are the two artists themselves. And Central Park was created over a period of 26 years for them to finally realize. And it was finally installed in 2005. And the reason it took so long is because for every work that these guys do, there has to be environmental studies, there has to be permission from city governments, and as well as bureaucracies, small businesses. Oh my God, it goes on and on and on. Eventually, the gates themselves, though, covered a total of 23 miles of pathways in Central Park. Now, what's interesting about this work is the fact that Central Park is very organic. It is very meandering in its pathways, but it's surrounded by this grid up, down, left, and right series of roadways and buildings that seem very static, very stable, very non changing. But when you look at the gates themselves, oh, I clicked on the wrong thing. The gates themselves also look like buildings. They're very rigid, but the fabric within them is ever changing. The wind flaps it around. Um, Let me move this out of the way. Um, the wind is ever changing the look and feel of the installation itself, meaning that they were making a statement about the ever changing face of the world and the environment that we live in. Um, The gates themselves are made up of steel, yellow, or gold bars, or orangish gold, yellow, orange bars that stood some 6 feet above the ground and are filled with this saffron golden fabric. Um, they had a whole lot of problems getting this off the ground. But eventually, the current mayor, Michael Bloomberg, supported the project and it became a reality in February of 2005, which was perfect because, as you can see, the ground itself was covered in snow because it was winter, it was cold. So, again, the color in itself plays an important part in understanding the work. We're talking about opposing forces, winter and summer, cold and warmth. The saffron kind of plays with the transient light of winter, inviting this warm feeling. As you can see, these things are huge, with the gates coming again, right? Some as low as 6 feet, some a little bit higher. Each gate itself was 16 feet high, and they varied. So even their levels kind of created an undulation, mirroring the park itself. And the visitors would have had to confront this pathway. Whereas the path seems stable, very, very static, the saffron cloth themselves end up creating a sense of transformation and a knowing about your destination. As Christo would say, the fabric is like a second skin. It is very related to human existence. The fabric will move with the wind, the water with the natural element. The fabric is moving like breathing. It is incredibly present. So instead of being mindlessly walking around these pathways, the viewer is forced to confront the reality around them, is forced to confront how they're walking instead of being mindlessly guided along the path. The viewer is forced to confront the direction that they move. And of course, the gates themselves, being static, stand in contrast to the fabric itself. Now, the person who designed Central Park was a man by the name of Frederick Law Olmsted, who designed it in the 19th century. When he designed the park, he stated, and I quote, not simply to give the excuse me, not simply to give the people of the city an opportunity for getting fresh air and exercise. It is not simply to make a place of amusement for the gratification of curiosity or for gaining of knowledge. The main object and justification is simply to produce a certain influence on the minds of the people, and through this to make life in the city healthier and happier. The character of this influence is a poetic one, and it is to be produced by means of scenes, through observation of which the mind may be more or less shifted out of moods, the habits into which it is, under the ordinary circumstances of life in the city, likely to fail. So Christo really sought out to reinforce this original idea of Olmsted's vision for Central Park. Now, the title itself is also an homage to Olmsted. The title "The Gates" is actually a reference to these entrances to green space from the surrounding blight of the mechanical city. The entrances, these green spaces, Olmsted called them gates. So the title itself is a reference to the original architect, or in this case, landscape architect. So the gates are meant to constantly bring us into an ever changing experience with nature and our surroundings. And whereas Central Park itself, as most parks seem, they seem to be carefully managed, and they are cut, trimmed, made to look pretty, but we don't see that. We don't see that change that occurs just through day to day upcare. With Christo's Gates, we are forced to see how these parks are ever changing, how these are ever, in their forms are ever in flux. Excuse me. He also wanted to make a comment about the manufactured understanding between real and the produced, which of course is a comment on mass media during the day. Now, as you can see here from the old maps of Central Park was supposed to be a respite from the manufactured look of the original Manhattan city. So, the gates themselves are bringing us and forcing us to realize the transformation from the city to the park itself. Now, the gates themselves are meant to bring us to a source of meditation. The color saffron, the fabric that he used, was actually also not only just a reference to Olmsted's green openings or entrances into the park, but also a visual representation of the Shinto shrines in Japan that we see here. These shrines now, of course, no longer focusing just on the Shinto religion, but also on the Buddhist faith. So it is meant to be a place of thoughtful meditation, a quiet philosophy of the humble gates. Now, the gates also reference this idea of the gates of ancient civilizations such as Rome and Greece, where when you enter into a triumphal arch in Rome or the gates of ancient Greeks, the warriors were meant to lay down their weapons and put away the cares of war and stresses of war. And the gates, of course, were meant to reinforce this original idea of the park for the visitors so that they could cast aside the wear and stress of their city life into this ever changing influx environment of Central Park. Now, with Christo's work, such as the gates, they are controversial. Of course, the most controversial works that he did is when he wrapped with pink fabric a couple of islands off the coast of Australia. And this was controversial because the environmental impact that people were afraid would cause to the mating rituals of certain species. Also in California and Japan, he did a series of large installed umbrellas. These umbrellas were about 16 feet tall and huge with large concrete bases. But unfortunately, one of these concrete bases was blown off in California by high winds, and it was blown over and actually killed a woman. So they were taken down. So that's Christo and Jean Claude's The Gates. You'll need to be able to study, talk about these, and be prepared to see a question on it on your mock exam. So I'm going to link this video as well as an essay about the image. In the assignment, make sure that you're taking notes, and I'll see you all in the next video.